Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Greenbook Podcast. It's Karen Lynch. I'm very happy to be hosting this episode, as I always am. Today, I'm talking to a gentleman that I had the pleasure of meeting a few weeks ago at a different event, not one of our events, but the Yale University Insights On conference. So today, I'm talking to Joel Renkema. He is with Inter IKEA Group. He's the global head of insights, and he inspired me with his talk at that event. And I quickly approached him and said, I'd love to have you on the podcast. There's so much value you can bring to the Greenbook audience. So Joel, first, let me just say, welcome to the Greenbook Podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for being great to bring me on here.
Oh, well, it did not require bravery, except maybe to approach you and say, hey, can I give you this invitation? But to all of our listeners, Joel spearheads a lot of things at the IKEA Group, just corporate and business strategy and product innovation and retail development, supply, media, communication, working with a great team of individuals. But that global head of insights really means he's the head of a lot of things up there. So let's just talk about, before we get too much into your role, Joel, tell us a little bit kind of about your background and how you got to where you are right now.
Yeah, that's cool. Originally from Australia, so a little bit far-flung at the moment, but started out in the public FMCG world with Procter Gamble. It's spent a couple of years in different countries, in different roles, all across different insights analytics types of roles. Global, local, regional capability, sort of the gap across. So public FMCG baby from the beginning at P&G, so the School of Marketing and Insights, right? Spent a little bit of time at Reckitt Benckiser as well, so similar sort of FMCG public company out of the UK, Netherlands. And then about 3.5 years ago, moved into IKEA, or Inter IKEA Group, as the franchisor, the corporate franchisor for IKEA across the world. So based in the Netherlands for a good 7 or 8 years now.
Were there any, if you think about the roles that you had, and you had more than one role at those companies, anything about kind of milestones along the way that you think set you up for success in your current role?
Yeah, for sure. I think from day one, it was throwing the deep end, right? And I think that's kind of followed the trajectory of their career so far. It's right. He's like, take roles. I've always jumped into roles that are probably a bit too big or a bit too dangerous or a bit too something else. Because then you learn a lot through that. So I think what was really powerful for me was starting from a local regional standpoint, rather than starting in a global type of standpoint. Because if you think about when we look at this industry like insights, right, everything happens on the ground. That's where consumers are, that's where competitors are, that's where retail is, that's where the context is they incorporate, right? So starting in that area, I think really, really set me up well in that direction. And then as a study for a company like Procter Gamble, look, one of the reasons I joined them was somebody said to me, perhaps about to join, it's like getting paid to go to Harvard, because it's the ABCs of insights, marketing, brand building, right? To go there and learn and develop and figure it out. But then I think after a good couple of years of learning and being taught, because it's basically like a marketing school. It's a very big school. And I loved that, right? And that's what I needed straight out of university. But then I realized a couple of years later, I wanted to go in the deep end again. And I'm a fan of not knowing what you're going to do and having to figure it out. And so that's why I actually moved over to Reckitt Benckiser in 2014 over to the UK. Because that as a company is phenomenally different to Procter Gamble, right? He was very performance driven, very entrepreneurial. Everybody has a role and responsibility. If you don't do it, it won't get done, right? And so you have to go in the deep end and figure it out. And I think that really, really shifted a lot of ways of working. So I think Procter was brilliant in terms of teaching me the ABCs of brand building, insights, marketing, and so forth. Reckitt was brilliant in terms of teaching me the ABCs of how to get things done. Living in a corporate world, influence management, activation of insights, so what, right? Trying through there as well. And I think really utilizing both schools. So they go into IKEA and they combine all of it together in terms of what insights, brand building, etc. should be bringing in, and then activate through that in terms of gating stuff too. So
there's 2 points I want to just make before I dig into your current role. Then, one, I every time I have met somebody who has started their career at P&G, it is very much like exactly that metaphor that you used, kind of like those foundational ABCs of what you need to know to work in those industries. I haven't met somebody who hasn't come out of P&G with a really stellar foundation in all of it, right? In insights, in marketing, communication, all of it. Like it's so grounded and such a great start. So kudos to them for their hiring practices out of school. I think that's great. And the other thing, and this is just going to be a bandwagon for a moment, for the women in the back, one of the things that I have always noted, and once I heard it, I couldn't unhear it. It's the idea that men traditionally do exactly what you did, which is go for the roles that are slightly over their head because they are confident and know they can take on that challenge. Women often kind of hold themselves back and say, I'm not quite qualified for that yet. So that's just, not to get on that soapbox for just a moment, but also to get on it. I want people to hear you and hear what you said. And if you didn't tune in completely, please have a rewind, Joel. That's a great example for everybody. So thank you for sharing that.
That's good. And I think the more that we're aware of that, the better, right? Because I think we see what we see and we feel what we feel. Maybe not for others. So I guess as managers and we're influencing through that as well. It's good to create awareness.
Yeah, pretty cool. Especially now also, I could sidebar into, all of the upskilling we're all doing for AI. Like if we approached it as I don't have the skill set, none of us had 5 years ago, right? But if we approached it as I don't have the skill set, then we'd never be ready for the today that we're in today. So anyway, that's a different conversation. Let's go into your role at IKEA right now and kind of what it looks like day to day and what you're mostly responsible for.
So when I joined IKEA a couple of years ago, I inherited more of a data insights function, I would say. They had gone through the process of in-housing a lot of the data digital product capabilities that we had, right? Building a lot of capabilities. The beautiful thing about IKEA, unlike a public FMCG type of companies, we have data and we have our retail system, right? So we operate through the value chain with our own types of data as well. And so then with that, you can do a lot of things. So we started through the data journey, but pretty quickly I realized we were more of a data function than a data-driven insights function. And then we decided and I think we hit, 2021, 2022. And like most companies, we realized, we got shaken up with COVID, right? And we realized that maybe the foundation weren't in place as a company, as well as in our functional areas, like many companies were at. And it was a good sort of shaking because it made us rethink, wow, should we be set up? No, what should do? So then we were, I think within a couple of months, we started a job in L'Oreal company. We realized that we needed to reorganize insights and the whole company, from the whole business. And so we started to do that. And then you went through a process of figuring out, look, where do you create value as IKEA, where you create value as insights, and therefore where should we be and what should we do? So then one of the biggest unique things about IKEA is that we have the value chain, as I say, from the forest to the home, right? So, we have our big supply network and logistics network, but a lot of that is IKEA entities moving through. We had our own sort of brand building, we have reach development, we have communication development, we have in-house communication factors that create content, etc. Like the IKEA catalog of the day that everyone's probably feeling with that we used to create. And then we operate the retail system through the IKEA network. And so then from an insight standpoint, it took a little bit to say, look, how can we connect all of that together? Because too often in insights industry, companies, you have like a consumer insights function, then a business insight function, and different pieces. But the best way that a company can move is moving block direction and utilize the insight in one way. So we created an insights organization that goes all the way from the forest to the home, right? So we had like supply logistics insights to retail insights, everything between. And then we set ourselves up for, 5 to 10 year foresight, strategic insight. Where should we go? Where is the work going? How we want to be moving forward, as well as like disruptive innovation type stuff that we lead through to operational, right? Like, when you go into an IKEA store tomorrow, if you click the app install, side face buttons, all that comes into that team, right? So we understand day to day how things operate as well. So then it's all connected, right? Forest, strategic, operational, connected together. And that's how we run as a franchise, as Inter IKEA Group, just so people know we're the franchisor. So we don't operate as stores per se, but we enable stores to operate through. And we develop all of the supply, retail, brand mechanisms to enable it as well. So it's more on the planning, development, and insights to enable that.
Nothing like a good disruption to make you rethink how you work operationally. I mean, I think that's one of the silver linings of what did happen in the last several years is the great rethink, right? And I think we're still having that. I think generative AI has had us all doing a lot of rethinking as well. So I'm happen to be a fan of that kind of disruption when it when everybody can stay above water and change what they need to change. So I love that you called that out. And I just want to go to your talk specifically at the Insights On event, because I think probably most people listening know a thing or two about IKEA. I mean, I'm sitting at an IKEA desk. I have an IKEA kind of standing side table next to me. I have a IKEA bookcase behind. I mean, I'm a brand fan, so I'm a little biased when I say I loved something you shared at this conference, which is about a chair. So talk a little bit about that. And I don't even want to say more than that and spoil it, because you started it by posing a question as how would we define a chair? So please go.
Yeah. Sorry, and I think this is what you're saying. The way that we look at things, right, is when you're operating in innovation or a business, anything like ours, right? You look at a chair and you say it's a chair. And that's how you would define it. And I think if you ask me, people like we did at Yale, what is it? Everyone says it's a chair. Of course it's a chair. Car is a car. A bus is a bus. A chair is a chair. Like it is what it is, right? Though we look at it differently, because we see it as a chair, but we also see it as so many other things, right? It's something that you stand on to fix the light bulb. It's something that you sit on to have dinner with. It's something that you put in the corner of a room as a style icon if you want to. It's something that you put in your bedroom to pile your clothes onto after the day. It's something that's universal in many ways. And for us, the reason why that's important is, as a business, we've always been based on creating a better everyday life for many people, right? It's all about improving life at home. It's not about selling a chair. Chairs will come and go. Tables will come and go. Those things will come and go. There's just executional points, right? The key for us is how do we create a better everyday life? And we do that through many different ways, such as the chair. The key for that is really understanding that what it is that you're solving for, right? The fundamental thing about old school light jobs to be done. Consumers don't buy a chair, they buy a solution, and that solution can be many things. It also goes into this, many businesses also look at it as well and say, okay, how do I have one consumer and get them to buy 5 chairs? I want to get them to buy a cheap chair and an expensive chair and a chair for that because I've built a repertoire. And of course we do that. If you walk into a store, we have something for every item. Right. And everybody knows you walk into a store wanting one chair and you end up walking out in the room. Right. That's the next helper for many people like ourselves. But for us, in terms of what we do, it's like, how do we not try to get one person buy 20 chairs, but how do we get one chair up for purposes? Because that's a value for it. Right. And yeah, there's business sense in that. That says that if you can do that, you can reach more people. It's the penetration mindset as opposed to consumption mindset. But it's also, we are there for the many people. And the many people we can define as people who might have smaller wallets, might be more challenged, or less space, or less funds, or less time, resource. So we don't want to have to, make it so that one person who doesn't have a lot of money has to spend it. We want to make it so that it's like, this is what you have. Now, how do I give you something that can serve multiple purposes? So that for you, it creates value in that railway as well. And that sort of shapes, a lot of comes from our business model, but it also therefore shapes how we think about innovation and how we sell through that as well.
Yeah, it's funny. As there are moments in time when I talk to somebody who works on the brand side, and I see myself as a customer, not just a researcher. We have at home, we have one of those IKEA bookcases where the bins slide out, and it was in multicolors when our kids were little. It was red, yellow, green, blue were the color of the plastic drawers that slid out. I don't know if you know the piece of furniture. I mean, you probably do. It's iconic. And I became an empty nester a few years ago, and I didn't get rid of this piece of furniture, but I swapped out the drawers for white. And now I use it for actually downstairs in a separate space in my home, which is like my art desk. I have art supplies in it. So same piece of furniture that served me well when my kids were little, I repurposed, and it's now serving a different purpose in my home. That is a value piece of furniture. And it didn't mean that I stopped buying from IKEA. I sure as heck have, almost regularly. But the value of that one piece of furniture has stayed with us for 2 decades now. I mean, that's part of what you're doing there.
Yeah, and I think that's the point, right? Is, a lot of people might look at a company like an IKEA or if I was looking like it's a fast fashion, fast furniture type of company. And yes, we sell volume for a volume business, right? But our interest is how do we create value for the long term? Because that's better for people, it's better for business, and it's better for the world, right? Better for sustainability, better for climate, better for all these other factors as well. And it's interesting how you said it as well, because I think it's the same thing. Even if I look at one person through life stages, it adapts, right? We don't have to have multiple kids in different life stages and we repurpose. But it's also across the world as well, right? We could design one chair and you sell it in 6 different countries because it has 6 different purposes and 6 different contexts or whatever it may be, right? So it's that universality and sort of adaptability for it that it creates that really good efficiency and innovation, but relevance for people through that too.
So, I want to move on to kind of the other aspects of your talk that were extremely interesting to me, which is about this kind of consumer segmentation. And we're starting to talk a little bit about it, but right, understanding the importance of recognizing new segments or underdeveloped or underserved segments. So talk to me a little bit about your approach in that space. It seems like it should be obvious that people that can benefit the business, but you're doing more than that. So talk to me a bit about your approach.
Yeah. And to be very honest, I think as a business, I don't think we, for many companies, have cracked segmentation as a topic, correct? Partly because the theory behind it evolves all the time, right? Different businesses are different as well. And I don't know if there's a perfect way to do it. For us, what we realized over time is there is no perfect segmentation. It doesn't exist. And there's not one type of way of looking at whether you're doing 10-year strategic direction through to operational execution in store. You also can't do it in the same way because it's a different year as well. For us, IKEA, we've always had the guiding thing, and it comes back from our founder decades ago, right? So we're there for the many people. Now, the big people sounds like an internal thing, but you can define it in many ways. We look at basically, is if you have limited time, space, money, resource, we have something for and that doesn't mean necessarily that's, people that have lower incomes. A lot of people with high incomes don't have much money because they like expenditure, right? And it's all about what do you have and how do we serve you with that? Then looking at things like small spaces, right? Anything that IKEA, many people enter IKEA when they look at it and say, I have a mess or I have chaos. How do I clean it up and how do I organize? That's why generally when you have kids, you go IKEA because your house explodes with stuff. You're like, how do I keep all of this together? Even more pronounced if you have a smaller space and the need for optimization within it works. And that's what we obviously have a lot of value out of it. A lot of people know us for as well. So we also have this long-term view of if you have, small space, similar rollets and resources that we store time to do something for you. But then we also believe in all our stages, right? And all for points of people as well, right? So from when you're going to college for the first time, when you go back to school, when you're leaving home, when you're having kids for the first time, whatever it may be, as you said around your example of your stories, right? We adapt through your last stages as well. So it's not about targeting one person and saying, how do I get the one person to spend more? It's about how do we provide the right thing for more people? And I think we do that intentionally because I think that's the right thing to do for people. We don't want to be a consumption society, right? That we're just pushing stuff into people's homes just because we can. That's not the right thing to do because that you get overconsumption. But it's more around it for as many people that need it will be there provided. And so we don't look at segmentation in a way as to how I just select one and go after it, which make up these two. And that works, I think, when you're a house of brands and you might have to do portfolio optimization through the brands. And therefore you say this brand is for this segment, that brand is for that segment, therefore they won't cannibalize. We're about reach and enabling more people to be able to sort of have what they eat through there as well.
It's like the definition of being mission driven. It's a point of strength, in my opinion, when I'm hearing you talk about this is what we do for people. You're leading with the need rather than leading with the product and saying, how can we sell this? Which is something that a lot of people talk about, but they don't necessarily execute against. I'm sure you've worked in systems or on teams that they went the other way around with their innovation, right? They came up with something great and then tried to figure out how to reverse engineer how to make it fit in the consumer's life as opposed to really meeting consumer needs.
Yeah, and look, to be real, we do both, like any organization. And I think the nature of innovation is always both. I think all of us at Insights would love the ideal way where it's like, here's the need, here's the product. How do you optimize it? How do you sell it in a very linear innovation process? But that's not the reality, right? The reality is some, designer had a brilliant idea and thought, why did we create that? And then thought about what insights did this serve. For us as well, we've got a long history in our supply manufacturing area. Right? We have suppliers that have been with IKEA for decades, right? Generations have been there. We have suppliers that have worked on like one part for decades. They optimize that and they know that better. Anybody knows that. So our point is ideas can come from anywhere. They come from the consumer, they come from competitors, they come from suppliers, they come from hands, right? And it's about how to they might have different starting point. But then how do we make sure we then have the totality of, yes, you got this, but what need does it serve? How does it help the business and how does it help people? And I think what's different for us in segmentation, I would look at an innovation is, compared to other companies that work that, we are so embedded in the purpose of creating a better everyday life for many people. It's why so many could like work at IKEA for 30, 35 years because they believe in it so deeply. And the benefit of being a private company in many ways is we can take investment choices, say, look, this might hurt business a little bit, but it's better for the consumer or better for people because we stand on creating that everyday life. So that we will always prioritize that. I think through, how years ago, many companies went through the purpose journey. And many companies were like, oh, what's my purpose? And they tried to come up with purposes that would save the world. And one of the time it was retrofitted backwards. Right? It was like, actually, this company exists, make a lot of money, but how do I find really good purpose? Because it sounds cool. For us, it's the reverse. We inherited our jobs. Many of us inherited our jobs based on a clear purpose at IKEA. And we let that be the guide for everything that goes into there. And that's one of the reasons I've only been here for 4 years, but it's one of the reasons we made a mistake because it's authentically there. I think we need to do more of that as well.
I love that. And I think, for those of you listening, you can look at the founders' stories. It's all that was all a part of the presentation that I was fortunate enough to sit in. But it's all accessible. You can find many of the kind of founder story online as well. But what I want to shift to is ask you about is how does that translate to the work you do with consumers? Do you carry those values into your research as well? Are there things that you are doing that kind of that feel like they're a fit to, you have such strong, solid corporate values. Is that translating into methodologies and approaches to work?
What's interesting in IKEA is, and I compare it to other companies or businesses that I've worked in and seen at other places as well, it's number one, process, and then I'll go methodology. Through a process standpoint, I see with the strategy function as well as the data functions, etc. And a lot of the reason for that is the starting point of everything that we do is inside. Right. So before we set all of our strategies for the year, we first get together, and the brief that I get every year is, tell me about the world. What's happening? Like, what do you want to know about the world? There's some big threat. The brief then comes, and then we oil that down, right, and say, like, this is what's happening in the world. This is what's happening in people's lives. This is what the needs are. Therefore, what's the implication from us? And then we create our strategies from that. And obviously, we mix the financials and the business requirement, etc., right? And then we create strategy from that. And that is the starting point that really happens. And so points of the year, we gear up towards that. Then whatever priorities we end up landing on to focus on is really based on that and where it goes. And combining what people need, where growth will come, to what opportunity goes there as well. So it's baked in this process. It's soft on this side. From a methodology standpoint, we very much do as well. To give you an example, it's like the one I think I spoke to you guys, shared with you guys at Yale as well. One of the things that we do across the world, is if you go into any IKEA store, you'll always find that there's certain areas of the store that are mocked up like somebody's bedroom or bathroom or living room or whatever it might be, right? Now, the way that we do that is the store co-workers, not agencies, that we don't outsource anymore, right? The store co-workers go into people's homes within a couple of mile radius of the store, bring the measuring tapes, they look around the home, they figure out how big the houses are, how big the dimensions are, how they properly live in that context, right? What their realities are. They get their needs and so forth, then they go back into the store and we build it, right? And then we put our furniture in there. And so it's so that it's relevant to you. So if I live within a couple of miles of the store, I go into the store and be like, hey, that looks like my house. Because it is, because a model like that, right? What's interesting through there is if you imagine every store doing that across the world. And we have, 450, 500 such stores, right? Counting every day. Harry's still doing that multiple times a year. The amount of coworkers that are interacting with consumers becomes a lot, right? But if you just believe that as it is, then you lose all the insight in the coworkers. So then we have a system called OpenHo, where we have a tech solution where basically anytime they do it, they put all their videos, their photos, their notes, whatever into a system. We capture all of it. And then anybody in the world that works for IKEA can see. So if I do a store visit in Bahrain or in Philadelphia, likewise can see each other's store in-home visit. They can see each other's in-home visits and learn from each other and do it. And then we have our product innovation team sitting in Sweden, designing innovation and designing the next chair and the next sofa. They can learn from the context of everything in each location as well. And the reason why I share that example is, as I said, our mission really is creating a good everyday life for many people. And that starts from understanding what that everyday life is like. I'm not a believer in creating innovation from one part of the world for the rest of the world. We can't have a few thousand product developers sitting in Sweden thinking they understand how Americans or Brits or, Chinese live. If they've never seen it or immersed in it or understand it, right? And so we have these systems, tools, methodologies that we have to connect all of that together so that when they're developing a chair, they understand what it means in 5, 6 different contexts around the world as well. So I made it very much designed based on there too. Or the other point, and then I'll finish off there, is that our need for a foresight and looking forward to the direction. Like, if really about helping the world get better, helping girls' lives get better, we need to understand what a home's going to be like in 10 years from now. What's the world going to be like in 10 years from now? And how do we influence that? How do we enable that? And our own methods and it was to actually develop the insights to do that as well.
There's so much that I love about what you just said. As a qualitative researcher, of course it makes sense that you would be going into people's homes. I love that your kind of retail staff, your stores are going into people's homes as well. And I really do believe that ethnography in general is going to be even more and more important in our work, because we have to stay connected to how people are actually living, not how AI thinks we're living, not how we say we're living, the whole say do gap. I just think that, I just feel like, anyway, that's my 2 cents in all of this. Is ethnography is just going to become more and more important. So I love thinking about how you're doing it.
I think that's all other podcasts, Karen. Yeah,
Exactly. We can
perfect evils of AI. I'll leave it there. There's so much there that we get to figure out.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll do a part 2 at some point. But let's talk about this foresight, because I do want to go there. And I think that a lot of the brands that are listening are, that's one area where, some companies have great, teams in place for this. Others, they barely have an insights team, let alone insights that are able to feed any kind of strategic planning and this future thinking. So talk to me a little bit about how you incorporate that into your practice there.
So if I think about a few things, organizationally, number one, we have the insights people in our team in running the different business units. We call it like product development, communication development, etc., retail and so forth. But we also have a good, decently sized team based on strategy and strategy. Because as the role of a franchisor is a lot of us sort of protecting and developing a future where we go as a business and enabling franchisees to succeed there as well. So I have a good sized and a very, very capable and a very talented strategic insights team that are super outside the box. My mandate for them is spend as little time in the building as you can and as much time outside the building as you can, because you can't figure out what's happening in the world and represent the outside in if you're not living in the outside of IKEA. So they spend a lot of time outside, connecting with brilliant institutes who know smart things, who are very smart at a lot of things, looking into reality of how people there. There's so many organizations that are looking for like the future of urbanization in 2030 and how I develop this city or that city and so forth, picking up signals from different parts of the world. Or this city is doing that, and maybe other city will start later, and just picking up all of those transit signals so we can bring back in as well. So we have a good team that's dedicated to that, that's focused on bringing that through, both from a strategic insight standpoint to enable the whole thing, right? From where should we focus? Where should we grow? How do we disrupt ourselves so that somebody else doesn't disrupt us, right? Like, what are those potential risks? And what it's like, what if XYZ happens? What would we do about it? and how we already get ahead of that so we can influence things happening as well. So there's an organizational part, there's a process part, as I said. Through the yearly planning and the strategic planning, it always starts with insights. And we always go back to that every year to evolve and adapt it every year as well. And honestly, at the moment, that was like every month, given like, probably like yourself as well. Every week, something happens at the moment, right? I go into a meeting and I walk out and something else happened in the world within that meeting, right? Things change. So it's ridiculous how rapid it is, right? So strategic insight isn't just like once for 10 years. It's like an ongoing living ecosystem of evolving those insights as well.
Yeah.
All the way through into so what, right? Because anything from foresight, and look, many foresights are like, the world's going to get more economically challenged, or it's going to get more technological. And it's like, great. So what? I know that. We all know that, right? But I think where it works really well for us, where we have done it well, we don't always get it perfect, but where we have done it well is bringing the insight into the so what and now what all the way through. Right, getting operationally minded people in the business who are super operators in the day-to-day to be part of the process. So like, now I'm seeing this, and in my operation mind, that means that. And this is what it means in 10 years, but this is what we need to start doing now, already about it. And how do we start activating and moving? Otherwise, it stays very theoretical as well.
I'm reminded that I would love to talk to your colleague who was with us for IAX Europe. One of the women that joined us on stage was Rania Wadden from Expo City, Dubai. And she was talking about kind of leading insights for a very future focused city like that. I'm thinking of your strategic insights team. And I'm like, wonder if they've been to Dubai. So I spent some time there. They have, of course they have. So, that's great. And actually that to me seems like one of the most intriguing types of insights there is. So thank you so much for sharing that. And I think it probably would be aspirational for other insights teams to develop that function if they don't already have it. It's pretty cool to see how that operates. Anything that you are, and again, nothing proprietary, but anything interesting that's come out of that work that you can kind of point us to, that type of work pointed out this specific type of trend, or that might have led to something else? Anything you can share?
Yeah, look, I think from a direction standpoint, it's no surprise that whenever we do something around foresights of direction, either for us, it typically lands in somewhere related to sustainability. And the reason probably for that is that as in the world, right, we're going through such change from a climate standpoint, right, biodiversity, etc. It's going such an evolution. And then as a business and a company, we care about search. Right? We care about what resources we use or what impact you have or should not, right? And how do we play a key role in helping in that as well? So a lot of it is, what happens if XYZ happens? We produce, forestation, big thing of us, we produce a lot of wood, we sell a lot of wood, etc. What happens if or change in the future, right? What happens if climate changes? What does that happen to? What does that cause on cotton production, right? All of these kind of what ifs around those areas. At the end of the day, we're a company that sells a lot of watches. If you think about it, right? It's chairs, tables, beds, whatever it may be. It's raw materials shaped into different sizes and colors and so forth. We're not a service industry, or yes, for a retail company, right? But a lot of it is behind the toys that we sell. So for us, it's a lot around like, where is that going? And how do we help that? How do we influence that? How do we be a force for good in that? Or how do we not just take but give in that as well in an equal? And I think it's interesting where the world is going on the topic of sustainability, right? Some places are going up and down and some are faltering or wavering and so forth. They're realizing they can't make tech inputs and so forth. We're just like, no, we're going after it. Even if the government says yes or no, we're going after it. Even if another companies aren't meeting the targets, we're going after it. And if we want to do that, if you want to have if you want to be a force for good, you often therefore need to have a leadership mindset. You often therefore need to say, how do I think ahead? How do I get uncomfortable? How do I disrupt? Even if somebody's not doing it, I'm going to do it. And I'm going to lean into this spot. And I think that's where a lot of foresight goes into for us particularly. And then you think about it as well, I suppose, secondly, we operate it in cities, in areas, right? Think about something like mobility. A lot of cities are talking about having car-free cities, right? Now, if you try to go to an IKEA store and buy a massive pack cupboard or a bed and you don't have a car to take it home, how do you do that in a car-free city, right? So you've got to start thinking differently about transportation, logistics, fulfillment, etc. as well, store location, all those kind of designs that we have. nothing that's unique to us. It's just a retail industry that's just what's happening, right? Two cities, but which can be a challenge or can be an opportunity. But they're the kind of areas which us and out there. I would be naive to think that other companies like us are looking into it as well at what they built at.
I love those examples. Thank you. And it actually has me, looking towards one of the last questions I wanted to ask you here, which is about managing not just change, which is where I thought we might be going, but also managing the ambiguity of that future mindset and that future thinking. You talk about leadership, kind of the importance of it, of having this mindset, um, to not only use foresight, but think through the what ifs and the scenario testing and scenario planning and all of that. But how do you upskill your team to get this mindset, these this kind of openness and this comfort with the uncomfortable, ambiguous, unknown future?
Look, I think there's two factors. There's how do you upskill my team, and then how you enable the receivers of your insights to receive it and do something about it, right? And I think that two charges of opportunities in itself as well. For our team, honestly, what was interesting a couple of years ago here is we tried to change the culture a little bit. And when I inherited the function, and part of our assignment, like what the company says we need to do, this is why we exist, was to provide insights. And I looked at it, I was like, providing insights means somebody's asked you a question and you're reacting to what you've been asked.
Mhm.
But I honestly believe, as an insights function, as an industry, we should know so much about what consumers go through, what competitors are doing, what the other happening in the industry, what the businesses go through. We're a knowledge function. We sit on so much stuff, right? That we should be the ones that are like anticipating what could happen, looking at it, challenging status quo to say, I see this, should we do that, right? Because if you think about many functions of the business, where if you're marketing or retail, supply, whatever, there's so much is like that. How do I deliver what I have today? As insights, we get the benefit of being embedded, but also removed to a degree, where we cover the whole value chain. We step back a little bit and we look at the forest in the totality, right? Not just in the weeds, and say, like, what if? And so changing the culture of not just you answer a question to your counterparts, but you come with the question and give the question and anticipate a challenge back. Then open people's minds. I think it was a really big opening for the team, because then it gives the permission to get bigger and think creatively. Then at the same time, as I said, if the team is sitting behind their desk at their laptop every day answering questions or doing concept tests, they're never going to think bigger. And so for me, it's always been spend as much time outside of the office as you possibly can, right? If you immerse with consumers, if you do industry visits, if you spend time with suppliers, one of the biggest things we do as well is send our teams into suppliers and at factories, so you learn how things are happening and what's happening, right? Because that's where it lives as well. Immerse into that reality every day, and you will feel the need. You'll feel the opportunity, and you'll have the passion to bring it in. Then, once you have the permission and the passion, then it's the skill of how do you communicate it, and how do you embed it, and how do you ingest it. And that's when it's all about, insights people are very good at the content and the knowledge, right? I want to have best insight possible. What I always tell a team is, I don't need the best insight. I need the insight that's good enough. Because the best insight that you don't execute well is gone. That it never gets executed. The balls of body generating it. For us, it's about having a good enough insight that you focus so much time on embedding, on deploying, and activating and changing and helping people to do something about it. Because consumers don't need a better insight, they need a better solution. And the only way to give them a better solution is to help the business to actually do something about it. So you ask a lot of time through those parts, and real activation, storytelling, communicating, relationship building, all that stuff, knowing the business, right? Insights people are great, technical people. But if they don't know business, if they don't know how the supply chain works, if they don't know how retail co-workers work in the day-to-day, they don't know how to execute the insight. They don't have empathy for the receiver. So it's not just, insights functions typically upskill in the technical. But for us, honestly, I think we spend more of our time upskilling in the business knowledge, because we hire people that are great technically skilled, right? And honestly, insights isn't that difficult as a competence area. It's doable, right? It's teachable. The immersing and understanding the reality of your end user of the insight is where I think the difference makes. So we spend a lot of time.
That's fantastic. And I'm pretty sure that there's a lot of insights professionals listening that are like, that's the kind of company I want to work for, because the way you described what their day in the life might be, it sounds like people would be inspired. It sounds like they'd be, that kind of immersion would free up the synapses to actually, come up with ideas or turn those insights into something that's fully usable. And very, very inspirational, Joel. I so appreciate it, and just that you're here with me sharing. Is there anything that we didn't touch on that you were really hoping that we would touch on today?
No, you triggered me on AI and ethnography. It's in my mind now, so we're going to come back to that at some point later. But the only thing I'll say on that one, and I'd love to get your perspective, whether it's now or at some point, is how we do AI to keep the heart for the human.
Yeah.
And keep the reality of that and keep empathy.
Yeah.
Because the way that we work as an industry is a lot about, thinking about COVID, a lot of us, how do we do research from our laptops? Let's use social media to understand what people need. That's great. There's a role for it. That I'm lucky enough to have started my career not yesterday, right? And knowing the digital era, that makes me sound old, but on the digital era, where you just go and live in consumers' homes, see 40-degree heat, and go shopping with them and understand and feel the reality of who you're trying to take care of. Serve. And I feel these days, when we're bringing insights people into the industry, we're recruiting people with great technical skill, like AI skill. But then it's proper hard for what are you trying to achieve? What are you trying to set that? I think I probably created it by character as a part there of like the power of the so what and understanding it, empathizing. Because people don't do things because it annoys, they do things because they have empathy for it. And I think how we could do that, I think that's one of our biggest opportunities as industry, is to how to balance that and get that right as well.
Yeah. And I still think, even if I think about my very digitally connected family, all young adults now, but pretty tapped in, and we're the family that when everybody comes home, which right now I have a house full, when everybody comes home and there's young adults on phones, TV on, iPad going, laptop nearby, and we are all super connected. I'm sure it would be heartwarming to a team at IKEA to see how the sectional sofa, everyone is flopped upon. They're sharing with one another what's happening on the phones. There's legs overlapping with other legs, and there's a whole lot of connection happening even in that digital space, which people wouldn't know if they don't see it by getting into people's homes. So I think that is probably, in my opinion, the number one way to just stay connected during this era, is by just seeing how human beings are interacting with it and how they're using it. And you might have my daughter in the kitchen who's worked with ChatGPT on perfecting her chocolate chip cookie recipe, because she doesn't like the recipes out there, but ChatGPT is helping make it her own. So she's using AI in her way, in her very Gen Z way. It's all visible within the homes. So anyway, so I'm sure your team is going to have more intel than many, many others out there, because your work is largely for the home. So thank you so, so much for your time and for your opinions today. I loved having you. I loved this conversation.
So thanks for the questions. They're good points. They're good topics.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you.
You're welcome. Excellent. And thank you to our listeners. Thank you to Big Bad Audio for which I should now be saying Big Bad Audio. Thanks for the video assist as well. And of course to you, Joel, really with gratitude for saying yes to my invitation. So we'll see you all soon for another episode of the Greenbook Podcast. Bye-bye all.